Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this Astral Viking knit bracelet. Now these will be part of a collection, so all the tutorials will be in a playlist once they're available, and that will of course be linked in the description box down below, and everything will also be available for sale in my shop along with other jewelry kits and tutorials. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make one of these bracelets for yourself, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now the wire I'm using is a regular round silver coated copper wire, and the first gauge here is a 0.6mm, and we're going to use this to make the loops with. Then I've got a 0.4mm, which is what we're going to use for the Viking knit itself, and finally a 0.3mm to attach things together and add the beads. And as for the beads, I'm using these 2mm rounds. Now the specific ones are some faceted hematite gemstone beads, but of course you can use whatever you prefer. And to finish off the ends of the bracelet, I'm using these kumihimo ends here that have loops in them where we can then attach our findings. And I'm using a lobster claw clasp and extended chain along with a few jump rings to put it together. We can of course use whatever kind of clasp you prefer. Now along with the kumihimo ends, we do also need some glue to help make them secure, and I'm using this E6000. It works great with metal. So to make this bracelet, we also need a few different tools. Now I'm starting out with my pliers. Of course, first of all we need our flush cutter so we can cut the wire. Then I'm using my tweezer nose pliers to help manipulate the wire. Now of course we need the tool we're going to make the Viking knit on, and this is a homemade one that I do have a tutorial where I show exactly how you can do that yourself. I also recommend something like an awl, which is a pointed tool that you can put through tight spaces that will really help get your wire through, and a draw plate, which is in this case a piece of plastic with different size holes in it, which we're going to use after we made the knit to help neaten it up. To make our loops, we're going to need the coiling gizmo tool, and I'm using the 5mm rod to make the coils with. I've also got a jewelry hammer that we're going to use alongside this steel block to help flatten out the coils and make our decorative loops. Now don't forget, you can always check out the description box below the video for the material list and any useful links. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. So I'm going to start off making the loops for the edges of the bracelet. So I attach the coiling gizmo to my desk using the clamp, and I then put the rod through the corresponding hole. Then take the 0.6mm wire and just wrap the end around the handle so it stays in place, and just leave the wire attached to the rail because it's hard to know exactly how much we're going to need. And then you just want to start turning the handle and creating the coil. Now make sure we don't overlap any other wires so it's laying nice and flat next to each other. And if you find at any point you get too much space between the coils, you can always push the rod against the tool and that will help tighten it up. And then you just want to keep coiling until you have the length that you need. Now I personally like to coil more or less the whole length of the rod because I'd rather have too much than too little, and any excess coils you have left you can always use for something else. Then I finish the coil and I can cut off the excess wire. And then I can just undo this little wrap on the handle and remove it off the rod. And I like to just also cut off the other end here so I don't have any flyaway wires. And then what we need to do is start to flatten this. So first of all, I'm going to just start from one end and I want to kind of get it into position a little bit. So right now the coils are straight running around like this. I actually want to then go from one end and start pushing it a bit sideways. You can see like this. So they're kind of laying gradually on top of each other rather than sitting right next to each other. And this is just to get them into position so when we start to hammer this, they'll all spread out in the same direction. So just do this all the way along to the other end. And it's at this point I'm then going to bring in my bench block here and the hammer as well. So I'm just going to lay my coils onto the block, and I'm making sure it's laying so where they're slanted to the side is down on top of the block. And then I just want to start kind of hammering this, but only gently. We don't need to hammer it hard at all. So just start from one end, and like I said, just do it gently, and you're going to see them starting to spread more. And you literally want to gently hammer this and go all the way along, which is going to start to separate out the individual coils, and we're slowly going to start to see the loops forming. So again, just do this all the way to the other end. Now once you've done the whole length, don't worry about it looking a little bit funky like this. We can straighten that back out, but if you want to, you can always go over it again and just help them separate out a little bit more. I like to just do this a second time and be a bit more focused on separating them out more and making them a little bit more even, and also straighten it back out a little bit. And again, like I said, don't hammer hard or anything, just do it gently, kind of more guiding the coils apart rather than hammering. And now I'm then going to remove the block because I'm now going to start pulling them apart more, but just using my hands. So I'm just again going to start from one end and start actually pulling the coils more apart, so you can see that it's starting to really shape that final look of the loops that we need. And you just do it a little at a time to the point basically where they're going to meet up side by side. And also as you go, you can flatten it down more if it opens up a little bit. You can focus on a specific individual coil that you maybe need to pull a bit more, or if you pull it too much you can always push it back together a little bit, but just do it slowly, a bit at a time, so we get them as even as possible, and that's the look that we're going for. So I now went through the whole length length, and this is what it ended up looking like. Now this is quite long. We obviously don't need all this for this specific bracelet. So what I'm just going to do is cut the length that I do need. So I'm just going to bring in my measuring tape and I'm going to cut about 20 centimeters of these loops, and I'm going to make sure it's more than I need. Just rather have a bit too much than too little. So cut that. That's one length ready, and then just cut the other one. So I now have the 2 lengths that I need for this bracelet, and I still also have a decent length left of the actual loops or coils themselves. Now, like I said, you could always use these for a second bracelet, or you could use them for something completely different. So now I have these 2 edge pieces ready. I'm going to put them aside and get on to the Viking knit. So I'm going to grab my homemade tool here, and this one has 6 loops. Now check out the tutorial if you don't know how to make this and you want to make your own, but then also a length of wire that I've cut off the reel. So this is really however much you're comfortable working with. Now I usually like to use a full wingspan. That way it's not too long so you can still manage it, but it's also still a decent length. But I'm then going to start towards one end here, and I first of all want to attach this to my tool. So just choose one of the loops where we're going to start. Then I'm going to come, in my case here, from left to right, and then come from behind the loop, come up through it and then out towards the front, and then just push that tail straight downwards. Then I'm going to use my thumb and hold onto it against the mandrel there, and take the long length of the wire and bring it around towards the right, and that in itself creates a little loop. As you can see, that's then looped into the loop in the tool. Now from here I'm going to grab the other end of the wire, and now we need to start going through all the loops all the way around the tool here. So take the end and go to the next loop on the right, and now I'm going to come down from the front towards the back and from right to left, and then I'm going to bring it through and make sure that it goes over the top of itself here from the previous loop, and then we just want to pull it all the way through until it's almost tight. And then I just like to make sure that I put my thumb on the loops here so that when I pull it tight we keep the distance between the loops, because we want it to be as even as possible all the way around. And then you can see we created another loop in the next loop in the tool, and in between the 2 loops we kind of had this little bridge. So moving on to the next one, rotate the tool so we can access the next loop here, go down from the front to the back and from right to left. Obviously you can work in the opposite direction if that's more comfortable for you, but then pull it all the way through, and again make sure it goes over the top of itself. You can put your thumb on it so we make sure that the distance becomes as even as possible compared to the previous one, and we have another little bridge there connecting the 2 loops. And you just want to go around and do this all the way until we get back to the beginning one. And now I'm back to where my next loop is, the first one that we started out attaching the wire to. So from here it's going to change a little bit, because obviously we're now not using the loops in the tool itself. We're going to use the loops that we're making throughout the knit. So what we're going to do is the next loop here, which was the first one we originally made when we attached it, I'm going to go above this little bridge that we made and go straight behind that loop from one side to the next, come out on the other side, and again make sure you come over the top of itself. And as we then tighten that, we then create the last little bridge there, and we've now basically started another row. So this is going to be the second one, and I'm now going to keep repeating this all the way around. So the next loop here, I'm going to go above that little bridge and then go right behind the loop itself and out on the other side of it. Pull the wire all the way through, and now this then creates a second little bridge beneath the first one. So right here we have 2 above each other. Continue with the next one, come right behind the loop and out on the other side, create that little bridge, and then just repeat this until we made it all the way back around to the beginning, which is then where we're going to now start the actual double Viking knit. So we're going to keep going behind the loops here, but instead of going behind the bottom one, which will be the single Viking knit and the regular one, what we're going to do is count the bridges here. So from the bottom one, I'm going to count 1, 2 bridges. Now obviously right now we don't have any more, but it's going to keep growing, so we're going to build more and more of them. But I'm going to count 1, 2 and then go behind the loop after that second bridge, which in this case is the top one, and then pull this tight. Make sure as well that when you pull these, it goes over the top of the little tail that we left from the beginning, so that tail gets hidden inside of the Viking knit itself. And we then created the second bridge on the last little section here. Move to the next loop, again count the bridges, 1, 2 from the bottom, go behind the loop right above that, which is also the second loop that we made. I just find it easier to count the bridges because you can see them more clearly. Grab the end of your wire again, go behind the next loop after counting 2 bridges from the bottom, and again work your way all the way back around. So now we're back to where we started out, and you can see we now have an extra bridge here, so it's 3, which is where it's going to start being important that we count 2 from the bottom. So I'm going to count 1, 2, which means in this case I'm going between the top 2 and just push the wire through from one side to the next. Now in this case it's a little bit tight and I'm struggling to get the wire through, and that is because we have that tail running down behind the loops. So to help with that, this is where an awl will come in handy, and you just push the point through the space where you want the wire to go. So basically creating a little opening which will then make it easier to bring the wire straight through. And then just pull it all the way, create that bridge, move on to the next loop. Again, I'm counting 2 bridges from the bottom, 1, 2, and I go behind the loop right above it, come out right on the other side of that same loop and pull it all the way through. Again, just make sure I don't catch that tail, but I let the bridge lay on top of it, and that is now creating a new bridge here. So you can see we're basically building this downwards, and we're going to have bridges on top of each other, and they're going to keep building like this. So just make sure you keep counting 2 bridges from the bottom and then go behind that specific loop. And this is then what it looks like when it's a bit further on. And then just to repeat, we count the bridges from the bottom there, 1, 2, and then go behind that next loop right out to the other side and then pull it all the way through. And then this creates the next bridge in the previous section there. Bring it around, and then you keep building it like this. Now, as you can see, I am running low on the wire here. So what we're going to need to do is add in a new wire, but first we need to finish off this end here. So what I'm going to do is continue as if I was going to make another loop, but instead of counting 1, 2 of the bridges and then going behind that loop straight to the other side, what I want to do is actually go behind the loop but then start to bring the wire downwards, so straight down, so it comes out right below the loops. And what I find helps is just grabbing the end with my tweezer nose and then just pull that through, so it does create the next bridge in that section, and it's also done 1/2 of this loop here that we're making. Now if you find it difficult to get the wire down through, you can always use your awl just to open up the space a bit, but then from here we need to then add in a new wire. So cut another length, whatever you're comfortable working with, and then take the end, and what we need to do is now come from the left and go towards the right, and we need to come behind the same loop where we would have come out if we just continued the pattern. So what I'm going to do on this left side, we are counting 3 bridges because we just made that new one, so it's 3 and then behind that loop. Now again, I'm not going to then come straight out to the side. What we also want to do with this one is feed this down behind the other loops and have it come straight down. Now again, this might be a bit tricky because there's wires in there a bit in the way, so I'm going to take the awl and just open up the space in between the wire and the mandrel, so hopefully that'll make it easier to bring the wire down. And I also find it easier just to create a little bit of a hook there at the very end. So go in behind the loop and then bring the wire down behind all of them, and it comes out of the bottom there, and just straighten it out and have it sit right next to the other length. And from here I'm going to put my thumb on it just like we did in the beginning to make sure it stays in place, then bring the wire around, and this now creates the other half of this loop, and it's just going to be completely seamless and blend in with the rest of the knit. And then all we do now is pick up the other end of the wire and continue the same pattern. So again, go to the next loop, count the bridges from the bottom, 1, 2, go behind that loop, pull the wire all the way through, tighten it so we create the next bridge there, and then just keep moving around. And we've now attached a whole new length of wire here and can continue to use this. And you just need to do this however many times you need to in order to get the length that we need. So I now made the full knit here. You can see you just keep lifting it off gradually more and more of the mandrel here. And now we can take it off completely. And this is then what it looks like. Now as for the length of this, just to show you, this specific one that I made here is about 16 centimeters long. Now that's a bit longer than what we need, so you can easily make it a few centimeters shorter than that. But I do prefer having it longer than shorter because obviously we can always cut it down, but we can't add more. But then it's time that we remove the tool. So just take your cutters, go in and cut off 1 loop at a time and cut the tool loops off, not the actual loops in the knit itself, and just do that all the way around and take the tool away completely. And here we then have our knit. So what we need to do now is cut 3 lengths of wire, and this can just be scrap wire that you have lying around, but about 15 centimeters or so. We don't need it to be too much. Then what we're going to do is use the top loops here where we had the tool come through, and I'm going to go through 1 loop from one side and straight through the loop that's on the opposite side to it, and then push the wire through so it sits at about the midpoint. Then bring the ends up, take a new length, go through the next loop and then through the one opposite it, push it through to the middle, and then bring the wires up, and then just repeat the same with the last one through the final loops there and bring those up. And now what I'm going to do is just hold on to all these wires here and then my knit itself, and then just gently rotate the knit so we twist these wires together, because now basically what we've done is created a little handle here for us to use to bring this through the draw plate, which I'm then going to grab, and then I just want to kind of find the hole that's about the same size as this knit that we made. So just put it through there, and this goes through easily, so this is a pretty good starting point. Now I can then step down one hole, so the next size down, and this is going to then be a little bit tighter but still pretty easy. And you just basically want to keep stepping down one size at a time, and it's going to start to get a little bit tighter as we're then actually starting to make this smaller. Go through the next hole down, and sometimes I like to go through the same hole twice just to make sure it's going through smoothly. Step down to the next one. Now that one was a bit tighter, so I'm just going to go through that again as well. And the second time it goes through much smoother. So basically just keep doing this just until really we reach the size that we want it to have. And you're also going to notice that as we're doing this, the braid itself becomes smaller, as in the diameter, and that also affects the length. So we're actually making it longer as well. So you can keep going down into the really small sizes. But for this design here, I want to make sure that it's still a bit open, because first of all, we want that kind of look, but also we need to be able to get some wires through the knit itself, so we don't want it to get too tight and compact. So I'm quite happy with how this looks now, and just for reference, I ended up stopping at 6mm size here. But then we have our knit ready, and again, I can just remove these top wires because we don't need to pull it through the draw plate anymore. So now we have our different components ready here. So it's basically time to start putting them together. So we have the rows of loops that we already made. One is going to go on either side of the knit here, but of course we then also need something to actually attach them together. So this is where we need to cut a length of a 0.3mm wire, and I have about 2.5 meters here. Now before we start putting anything together, I'm just going to take these rows of loops, and on one end where I'm going to start out, I just want to undo the first couple of loops and basically straighten the wire back out. Now don't worry, it doesn't have to get completely straight or anything, just so we don't have the loops, because we need that as we're going to finish off the bracelet at the end. So just undo those first couple of loops like that, and repeat the same with the other one. And once we've done that, I can then grab my length of 0.3mm wire that we cut ready, and then also the knit. So I'm just going to start with these two because I want to attach the 0.3mm to the knit itself. And then I'm just going to start on one end here, so we don't need to cut this end, but just the other one we'll need to adjust the length. And I'm going to go through the braid from one side to the next, so straight through like this. And then I want to pull this all the way through so we end up with about the midpoint in the braid here and about even lengths on either side. And then I like to just grab one end at a time and just go back through the braid again. So in this case, I'm just taking the right one, going through. Make sure you go through a bit away from where it's coming through already, so it doesn't just pull straight through the braid. We need to catch on the wire that's within the knit there and just pull it all the way. I'm just going to repeat with the length on the other side as well, because we do need to end up with a length coming out on either side of the knit, and pull that tight as well. And this is now our starting point. Now we need to start incorporating our loops as well. So again, we can just do one side at a time for now, because we just need to get them attached first of all, and it can be a little bit fiddly until we have them more in place. And then what I'm going to do is attach these loops to this side of the knit all the way down by basically wrapping around the little wires that are connecting the loops at the very bottom there. So I'm going to come down between the first two loops and just hold on to it the best you can. You can also use that little tail that we straightened out, and then come up between the loops and the knit. So basically we're wrapping around the wire that's connecting those loops, and I like to just do a couple of wraps, so about 3 or so. Now I'm then going to take the end of the wire that I'm working with, and we need to bring it back through the knit to the other side. So just go through the knit wherever you're closest to, and then I'm just going to make sure that when I come out on the other side, it's just a little bit further up, so that is ready for when we need to attach in between the next two loops on the opposite side here. Obviously we haven't attached that yet. And then we pull this tight, make sure we avoid any kinks, all the way down, and tighten that nicely so the loops are sitting right next to the knit there on the side. And then this length of wire that we just brought through is ready here on this opposite side, but before we use that again, we just need to attach the loops on the other side using the first wire on this side here. So you can just kind of push the other one out of the way for now, then bring in the other row of loops. Now we want to get these as even as possible with the other side. So first of all, place them where they're going to sit, and then the wire here that's coming out, the very first one, remember, not the one that we just brought out that's further up. We then need to bring this in between the first two loops, and again up between the loops and the knit. So we're just wrapping around that bottom wire that's connecting the loops. Then from here, I'm just going to flip it to the back so I can kind of see what I'm doing, and then take the end of the length that we're using, and then we want to go through to the other side, but not straight through. We want to make sure it comes upwards at a bit of an angle. So again, we're working our way up the knit gradually. And now we can also start to see where we actually need the wire to come out, because we have both loops attached now. So I want to make sure that it comes out roughly in the area where my next two loops are connected. Pull the wire all the way through, avoid any kinks, and then make sure it's sitting nice and tight there. And as you can see, it's still a little floppy, but as soon as you do a few wraps of these, it's going to get a lot more fastened and easier to work with. So you can just flip your piece however you need to, depending on what's more comfortable, and so you can see what you're doing. Then I'm just going to take one side at a time, doesn't matter which one, and wrap around that wire that connects the two loops, but now the next one. So this in my case is in between the second and third loop, and I just want to wrap around that wire. I'm going to do it 3 times. I like to keep it consistent, and I'm just going to flip the piece so I can see what I'm doing on the back here. So go through the knit from one side to the next, and just skip that next gap between the loops, because that's when we're going to wrap with the wire that's already there. So I need this to come out to be able to wrap around the ones after that. So that'll be between the third and the fourth one in this case. So I'm just getting that into position, pull it tight so it sits right next to the knit there. We don't have any gap, and now that's in position. I'm going to flip back to the other side, and we just need to wrap this bottom one around the wire in between the second and third loop on this side as well. So just get the other one out of the way, and then wrap around those, in my case 3 times here, and make sure your wraps are sitting nice and tight next to each other. For the third wrap, I'm also going to be bringing it through from this side over to the opposite side, and again make sure it then comes out to fit with the next gap that we need to wrap between the loops. And pull that tight, and you can see they're gradually getting more and more solid here, so less floppy you could say, and they're going to be staying in place. So this is basically what you want to keep doing. They're now back to opposite sides, so just take whichever one you want to start with to do the next few wraps, and you want to keep wrapping in between the loops there, making sure you catch all those little bridges and connect it all the way up the sides to the knit that we made. So now I've reached the other end here, as you can see, and I've stopped at the point where it's the length that I need, and this is how it looks so far. So you can see these side pieces with the loops are much more solid on the side of the knit now. But then here on this end, I'm just going to cut off the excess of the loops, because we might as well get rid of those. They're not going to be in the way and catch on the wire necessarily, and I still have the ends of my wire attached as well. So the very last place where I wrapped the loops onto the Viking knit, I'm going to just cut a couple of loops beyond that and cut off the rest. Same with the other side. And the same then with the other end. I'm just going to start undoing these. So just the ones that are after that last wrap, just undo them in the same way. So basically straighten the wire back out, and it doesn't have to be completely straight, just so we don't have these loops, and then just have that come straight out next to the Viking knit, and just repeat the same on the other side. So then what I'm going to do now is start adding the beads in. I'm just going to show you on one side because it's the same thing. So I'm going to bring my weaving wire up. It's still the same length. Now if you do find that you don't have enough to finish, or if at any point maybe it breaks, you can always just add a new wire. So finish it off like we would at the end. I'm going to show you that later, and then add in a new length. But I'm bringing it up, so this is going to be my front of the bracelet, and get it into position. So I'm between the Viking knit and the length of wire here that I straightened out, and then I'm just going to add a bead onto the wire, let it drop all the way down, and I want these to sit basically in that connection area where the Viking knit and the loops are connected, and you can see all the little wraps. So these beads are basically going to sit there and cover that. So obviously we need to fasten them as well, so they are there securely. And basically the goal is to find little spaces that we can go down between and bring the end of the wire through to make sure this bead ends up sitting where we want it to sit. So let's have a look here. The bead is going to sit over the top like this, pushed all the way down. So I'm going to put the end of my wire here down through the little gap there is that's right underneath the loop between that and the Viking knit, and it's coming out on the back now. I'm going to pull it through, and then just make sure the bead is sitting right down where the wire is coming out from, and then pull this tighter, and there we go. That's basically positioned that bead in place now. Then we need to put the wire into position to add the next bead. So you then want to make sure you come around the wire and come up in a different place to bring it back through to the front here. And what I also like to do is sometimes hold onto the bead while I'm then pulling the wire tight, just to make sure it stays where I want it to. So you can see my wire is now coming up literally right next to the bead. So I'm in position to add my next bead. So put it onto the wire, let it drop down, and that's going to sit right next to the first one there. And for this one, I'm going to then make sure the bead sits as far down as it'll go. I'm bringing the wire down between two loops here, and then we want to come back up through and then pull the wire through. And again, I've got my finger on it, while then just pull it tight, and then the two beads sit right there next to each other, and my wire is in place to add the next bead, and we'll basically just keep repeating this, adding the bead, let it drop down, and then just find little gaps and spaces where you can put your wire through to then be able to pull it tight and secure the bead in place. And then we basically build it up like this all the way along, and of course once we've done one side we'll go to the other side and repeat the exact same thing. Now that all the beads have been added in here, we can finish off the weaving wire. So I'm just going to wrap them around the 0.6mm here that's coming straight out a couple of times. The same with the other one. And then we can go in and cut off the excess. So just cut that off and make sure to just tuck the end in and away so it gets kind of tucked in between the wires. And of course the same with the one on the other side as well. Tuck the wire away, and then we just got to deal with the actual 0.6mm lengths, because obviously right now they're sticking out and away from the piece and they're way too long. So what I'm going to do is cut down the ends here, but making sure they're still just a bit too long, because what we need is that extra length. Just cut them down to be able to then take my Tweezernose and go down a little bit on the wire there and put a bend into it, and I make sure the bend goes in towards the knit, and then we can tuck that end into the knit itself, and you just want to then push it in so it literally gets pushed in there and tucked out of the way. And the same with the one on the other side, because that way we make sure we don't have any ends sticking out, but it's all hidden away, and just push it into place. So something like that. And of course we want to repeat the same on the other end as well. Now on this end we have the knit itself that's also too long as well, so of course we need to cut that down to be about the same length as the other one. So you can also use the cord end itself as a guide to see where you need to cut. So it's going to sit about there, so we know that I need to cut about here for the end to fit inside of it. And of course I'm making sure that I'm cutting above where I ended the 0.6mm as well. So you literally go through the knit here and just cut a bit at a time. Now you will find that little bits are coming off, and that's because of how we made the knit, of course, but it won't unravel just by itself because it is wire, so you don't need to worry about that. So you can just get rid of all these little bits that come out and cut anything off that's excess. And I like to just kind of get rid of all the loose little bits as well on the end. And now to get the cord end to obviously sit here and stay in place, we need to also add some glue. So that's where the E6000 comes in. So I'm just going to take a bit here onto a toothpick. I'm just using that as my application tool. You can use whatever you have handy. So grab a decent amount and then take the cord end, and we want to get this glue inside of it. Now we don't need to fill it up completely, because remember the knit itself is going to actually go inside of it, and whatever's excess is going to come spilling out. But just fill it up nicely and make sure you cover all the inside walls, and then we can just place it on the end and just make sure we get all the wire inside, also that 0.6mm that we put into the knit, and really push it in place. And obviously want to do the same with the other end, and then just leave it to dry, and then you have these loops where you can attach your findings. So once our glue is dried, we can use the clasp and extend a chain, and because this is a fairly flexible bracelet, you can see we can easily kind of shape it around the wrist when using the clasp, but it does get a little bit of a funny shape like this. So once I've then closed the clasp, what I like to do is just help encourage it a little bit into a more appropriate shape for the wrist. So make it a little bit more oval shape, so it's going to sit nicely on the wrist when we wear it. That way it's going to be a little bit easier to put on and off as well. And then our bracelet is finished and ready to wear. Now there will be more pieces added to this collection, so you can easily make matching jewelry sets. So if you don't want to miss out on those, make sure to subscribe to my channel. And there'll also be a playlist dedicated to this collection, which I'll leave in the description box down below. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.